Larry, here is what we've learned from the Israeli media. Yedioth Ahronoth, one of the largest, outlets in Israel, they're talking about that Iran's ballistic missile production capacity could reach up to 3,000 per month if Israel doesn't take action.
Hmm?
What is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean, Larry? What sort of action do they want to take?
Well, wait. I thought Trump obliterated Iran. I mean, we kicked Iran's ass so bad they're not going to get up for years. So, this is look it the narratives, the shifting narratives. They're now trying. This is a propaganda effort to try to create a foundation for justifying a new attack, but they're not there yet. Uh, Actually, we see this hypocrisy on display, and I don't know if you're Dave Chappelle, the comedian. He just did a show on Saturday night, and he was commenting on the fact that the Zionists had been attacking him because he went to Saudi Arabia and took that Muslim money and putting on a show. How dare he? Because the Saudis murdered Jamal Khashoggi, and and then Chappelle is Chappelle really has a gift for this. He goes, you know, I didn't hear the same complaints when Israel's been killing 240 journalists. you know, and he says, I guess that this one just was somehow more important. But he was pointing out immediately the what the hypocrisy was on the part of the West. And there is a real split that has developed in the conservative circles here in the United States. Um, if you saw, the Charlie Kirk's organization put on this American festival called I'm Fest, and one minute Ben Shapiro, this um, Zionist cretin, is out just ripping up Candace Owens, ripping up Tucker Carlson. Who, congratulations to Tucker Carlson, he was named Anti-Semite of the Year. Yeah, the fact the fact that these crazed Zionists think that by attacking Tucker Carlson in that way, that's going to build support to destroy Tucker, is having the opposite effect. It's like building Tucker's power and making him more influential, not less. But the Shapiro comes out and he attacks Tucker, Candace, and Megyn Kelly. Uh, and Megan's sort of I'll call her a borderline Zionist. "Oh, I love Israel." But boy, she was offended. And she said, I thought we were friends. We ain't now, no more. So it's a real divide, and that's not going away. And the fact that the Zionist crowd out of Tel Aviv, both the Jewish element and the Christian element, they're alarmed because they recognize that the narrative of the David versus Goliath. And notice that Hollywood's put out a new animated David movie. David is such a blonde, blue-haired boy, and so gentle, and kill that nasty Arab giant. It's just more propaganda, and the Americans are, a growing number of Americans are no longer buying it, and that's created a real problem for both the Trump administration, more importantly for the Netanyahu administration, because they are desperately trying to buy influence with people, put influencers out there at $7,000 a pop, and we've learned now how penetrated the U.S. government is, particularly the FBI. I don't know if you saw this one clip that was circulating of Dan Bongino, the deputy head, the number two guy in the FBI. And then this podcaster, I don't know who it was, but she was, what cause is closest to your heart? Israel. It's like, oh my God. Please, enough. Between Cash Patel and Dan Bongino, this whole Israel first mentality that's been imprinted on the Trump administration, it's running into some trouble because the growing majority of Americans, particularly under the age of 35, they ain't buying it.
Yeah. Larry, I think the case of Charlie Kirk is getting so much, you know, even with the new information coming out, and they say that somehow the FBI was covering up something,
Yeah.
they're trying to do.
I'll tell you exactly what I think they're covering up. I think the FBI had information that there was a planned hit by Israel on Charlie Kirk, and that they failed to stop it. And then their goal after it was to cover it up, just like they tried to, the U.S. government covered up the attack by Israel on the USS Liberty. I think the circumstantial evidence that points to it is enormous. Um, and the story that this kid, Tyler Robinson, who had never been to this university before, who had never, he hadn't scoped it out in advance. And I can't emphasize enough that if you're going to carry out, an assassination attempt on somebody using a long distance rifle, you have got to know where they're going to be seated, and you got to know the distance from where you're going to be shooting to that target, because where you aim the rifle, it varies where the bullet will hit depending on the distance. Because, bullets travel in an arc, they don't travel in a straight line, they follow the curvature of the earth. And so,
Especially if you're at a different height.
yes, yes.
You're at the top of a building.
So this is the story we're told is that, oh, this kid just he was upset about the Charlie's comments about transgenders, and by God, he was going to get justice for his partner, whatever he she it was, and that he grabbed his grandfather's rifle and then just I guess picked up some spare ammunition and then headed off to the campus to see if he could find a place to take a shot. This story has so many damn holes in it.
A shot which should have blown his head off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it was the round, the 30-06 that they claimed, that's a devastating bullet that would have passed completely through the neck, severed, at least half severed the head, if not fully severed it. That didn't happen. So, but my point is, there is this, enormous effort to pressure to try to shut down Candace Owens, and she makes some mistakes in what she says, but her overall instincts are exactly correct, and the curtain's been pulled back on the Zionists that have been working the machine behind the curtain, and they're getting exposed, and that's created a problem for Netanyahu. That's creating a problem for the future of Israel, and it's creating a problem for Trump.
And you have simultaneously Epstein.
Oh, who?
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. Here, let me show you. I have one of the documents that was released.
It looks authentic.
Yeah. Oh, God, the try. There's nothing to see here. Well, if there's nothing to see here, why do you have all that blacked out? I mean, if there's nothing there, why hide it? Expose it, put it out there. That'll prove that Trump is innocent of this. That Trump had nothing to do with this, and that Epstein was not an asset of Mossad and working with the CIA, because the fact that Epstein was tied into the arms purchases through Maxwell in the 1980s for the Contras, right away that tells you there was a tie with the CIA.
Professor Marandi, on Larry, you as well. On Saturday, I talked with Dr. Michael Rechtenwald. he has started a movement in August 2025. It's called AZAPAC, Anti-Israel, America PAC. And he feels, Professor Man, it's not something that created from outside of the United States. We in the United States, you see the people who voted for Democrats, they're just getting separated because of what's going on in Gaza, basically, and with the case of Israel. And you see, as Larry just mentioned, you see at TPUSA, they're talking about, a faction, a important faction of the Republican Party. They're thinking differently about the Israel and the support of the United States to Israel. And do you think that you talk about you said how Iran has changed, Russia has changed, China has changed. How do you see the United States and the changes that are happening in the United States?
I don't think I never thought I would see this sort of change in my lifetime. I mean, I have no position on Mamdani himself. Maybe he'll be another Obama. Maybe he'll be something half decent. Maybe he'll be decent. I don't know. But the fact that so many young Jews voted for him, I think, is itself a major and significant sign. It shows that it's not just Christian Americans or secular Americans or Muslims. It is Americans from different religious backgrounds, different racial and ethnic backgrounds that are turning against the Israeli regime. And Larry would know this much better than I because I live in Iran. But I always saw Israel as having a very clear hold over U.S. public opinion,
Yep.
always. And I never thought this would change. But the changes that we're seeing now in the United States and in Europe and across Europe, but in the United States, it's the United States is of particular importance because it's the most important power by far in the West. So you do see this huge awakening among young people, and a lot of the key activists have been Jews. A lot of the shows like your own show that are very critical of the Israeli regime are either run by young Jews, or Jews are involved in electronic intifada. You have Jews working there. The gray zone, Max and Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, and Aaron Mate. You have Katie Halper. You have a host of uh, Jewish Americans speaking out against this regime, and their voices are now carrying much more weight than 3 4 years ago. So, and I think that just shows, first of all, uh, uh, how morally decent young Americans are when they get real information. They their opinions evolve, and that's why I think that the last 2 and some years has been catastrophic for the Israeli regime. I believe that they are the big losers in all this. I mean, all those countries that have been complicit, that have sold oil or transported oil or did business as usual or buying gas, they've all failed, morally speaking, in our region. Or those who have embassies and do trade, or those who went to Egypt and Sharm el Sheikh. I think all of them are complicit, but I think still the Israeli regime is the big loser in all this, and their supporters are the big losers. It's uh, people are shy about, and many people are shy about even giving I mean, in Iran, as I said, 3 years ago, I can't give numbers. I don't, because it's anecdotal. But you had a group of you'd have students who would attack the Palestinians, and they didn't have any historical knowledge. But they were, a lot of it was just in opposition to the government. If the Iranian government was supporting the Palestinians, they thought otherwise. But after what we saw during the last 2 years, their numbers have dwindled dramatically. So this is a huge loss for Netanyahu. It is a huge loss for Zionism. It is a huge loss for APAC and all those. And the very fact that you see Tucker Carlson, as Larry was saying, coming and becoming the most important person in U.S. Media. And now Candace Owens, who has an even larger audience than his, despite the fact that sometimes she says things that don't seem very credible, but on the whole, her argument is pretty straightforward. She's showing the inconsistencies in the FBI's account, and it just that account is doesn't it's not true. It can't be true. It doesn't that things their claims don't make sense. So she's becoming more important, and then uh, you're seeing this, on the Democrat side among independents, young people, they've all turned they've largely turned against the regime. That I think is all welcome news. It may not show, um, it may not have, it may not change things fundamentally in the near future, but I think if you look down the road, this is very bad for Zionism.
Yeah.
Larry, before wrapping up, what is your understanding of, Professor Marandi just described how he feels, how he thinks about the situation in the United States. But when it comes to you, you live there, you
Yeah.
see everything there. What is your take on that?
Well, actually, looking back, especially over the last 60 years, I go back, let's say 65 years. I mark it to the release of the movie Exodus, which starred Paul Newman. And uh, that was really the first big uh, mythologization of Israel as, tiny little David fighting against this Goliath of evil Arabs and Muslims. Um, and it actually was fascinating about they actually acknowledged some of the terrorist roots of Israel in that movie. They had characters that played that were locked away like for the Irgun. Um, I think that there's been an active propaganda campaign on the part of Israel that goes back quite a while to portray Muslims as villains, and the Jews, but it's really Zionists because, as Professor Marandi correctly noted, you've got a lot of people who profess Judaism or acknowledge their Jewish roots that are speaking out against Israel. And he mentioned Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, Jeffrey Sachs. Um, but when you look at what does the Islamic religion, doesn't matter whether it's Sunni or Shia, what does it say about Jesus? What does it say about his mother Mary? It is respectful. It recognizes Jesus as a prophet. It exalts his mother Mary. I think she is actually mentioned in a way that no other woman in Islamic history is mentioned. And whereas you come
The
to
chapter of the Quran is named after her.
yeah, so you know, but yet that's hidden from Christians, and we've seen this now in the wake of this attack on Bondi Beach in Australia, which I am increasingly beginning to believe that Mossad is playing a direct role in helping carry out such attacks in order to further poison the atmosphere and make the West anti-Muslim. Even though, and I come back to Russia, we've seen in Russia that Russia is a dominant. It is a Christian nation. Its foundation is Christianity. Its history 1,000 years ago, Christian, but it is not fixated on this anti-Muslim theology. Uh, in fact, the Muslims that live in Russia are patriots, like Abdi Aludinov in particular. But it's not just with him, Kadyrov. And even with the past history of the intense civil war that took place in Chechnya more than 16 years ago. So Russia doesn't fall into that trap. Whereas in the West, we're seeing just this flood of information about why we got to hate these Muslims and love us some Zionists. I mean, it's really despicable. And that, the success of that narrative has fallen apart now. And that's what has Netanyahu and his crowd terrified, because no matter how much they just brought 1,000 evangelical pastors to Israel. Hey, all expenses paid trip. And I guarantee you several of those pastors were offered sexual opportunities in part of the tourist package that they freely partook of. But in order to try to shape Christian congregations to hate Iran, hate Muslims in general, and love them some Israel. Yet, when you get into the Talmud, and several ardent Zionists have become, they're aware of this, so they're trying to cover it up. But the references to Jesus, the mother of Jesus, Mary, as a whore, as a prostitute, and Jesus is burning in a pot of excrement. They try to suggest, oh, that wasn't really about Jesus. That was about some other guy who just happened to be named Jesus. Oh, okay. But like I said, this whole propaganda narrative is coming apart, and it's unleashing the equivalent of what I'd call a political earthquake in the United States.